On November 24, 1859, an English biologist published a revolutionary piece of scientific literature. In his groundbreaking paper on the origin of species, Charles Darwin introduced the scientific theory that populations of species evolve over the course of generations through a process called natural selection. At the time, there was already great debate about the origin of species and how such a variety of organisms came to be. Darwin's natural selection proposed that since the environment cannot support unlimited population growth, not all individuals get to reproduce to their full potential and pass on their genes. Those individuals whose traits and features are more adapted to the environment for survival are able to reproduce and pass on those advantageous genes to their offspring. Species evolve over time, advantageous traits are passed on, and only the fittest, most adaptable, best evolved individuals survive. Exactly 100 years after Darwin published his theory of evolution, a German automotive designer named Ferdinand Alexander Porsche, or Butzi, was tasked with creating an evolution of his own. He was the son of Ferry Porsche and carried the legacy of the Porsche name. He decided to create a car unlike any other, a piece of automotive engineering that could go fast, handle with precision, provide comfort and space. A car capable of tackling the corners and straights of a racetrack, but nimble enough to be driven to church the next day. Development for this new car began in 1959 and culminated in 1964. The evolution of this car has been carefully crafted to redefine what is possible. Through its many iterations and generations, Porsche has selected the most successful traits to be passed on. Much like the evolution of species, the 911 represents the evolution of German engineering, the continuous search for perfection in an automobile, the epitome of timeless design and breakthrough of engineering boundaries. This is the evolution of the Porsche 911. Before there ever was a 911, there was a 356. The 356 was the first commercial success of Porsche. This was the machine that began the Porsche legacy as a builder of high-quality, high-performance vehicles. The 356 follows the now standard recipe of a well-made Porsche sports car. It was rear-wheel drive, air-cooled, lightweight, nimble handling, and had a rear engine layout. Production for this car actually began in Wendt, Austria, where 50 units were made. However, in 1950, the factory relocated to the now famous Zuffenhausen, Germany. The 356 was meant to be fast and sporty. At the forefront of development was the concept of making a lightweight car with a powerful engine. Ferry himself had experience with this design focus. He described how by the end of the war, he had a Volkswagen Cabriolet with a supercharged engine. From driving this, he experienced firsthand that if you have enough power in a small car, it is nicer to drive than if you have a big car which is also overpowered. Balance is ultimately what Ferry was seeking from the 356. The car saw great success both for public use and in the racetrack. The 356 was introduced to various rally and racing events, achieving high success in most categories. Through its lifetime of 18 years, the 356 had various revisions, upgrades, and modifications, all which made the car better than its previous iteration. However, as the commercial success of the 356 began to dwindle, Ferry recognized the need for a new, exciting model, a proper successor to the 356. And on September 14, 1963, on an auspicious Saturday morning, the Porsche 911 was unveiled. Originally codenamed the Porsche 901, the project was largely undertaken by Ferdinand Alexander Butzi Porsche. Development of this machine began in 1959. The design of the 901 was largely centralized around the already proven concept originating from the 356. That is, it was meant to have a rear engine configuration. Additionally, Butzi wanted the car to be more powerful, larger, and more comfortable than the previous 356. Originally, He designed the car with proper space for seating 2 rear passengers. Nonetheless, Ferry Porsche insisted that the successor to the 356 was to utilize fastback styling. After listening to Ferry's comments, mocking up 7 prototypes and involving Erwin Cometa, leader of the Porsche car body construction department, the 901 finally settled on its now iconic fastback design. From its inception to the present day, the silhouette of the 911 has remained largely unchanged. The 911 was, and possibly always will be, defined by 2 lines: the sloping fastback roof and the middle line striking from end to front. Through its history, iterations, changes, and evolution, the exact 2 lines remain present. Almost sensual in nature, the silhouette transcends time, remaining appealing, beautiful, and relevant through its history. The one aspect that has changed, and drastically, is performance. The history of the 911 can be divided into 7 defining eras: the origins, the G-Series classification, the turbo inception, the Type 964, the glorious Type 993, the water cooling formulation, and last but not least, the avant-garde. The origins encapsulate the early years of the 911. Though development began in 1959, it wasn't until 1963 when Porsche revealed to the world what they were working on. Debuting at the Automobilausstellung, or Frankfurt Motor Show, on Saturday 14, 1963, in Frankfurt, Germany, the 901 quickly claimed accolades from enthusiasts. Fast forward to October 1964, the 901 prototype made its second appearance at the Paris Motor Show. The car was a success across all shows, and the design struck excitement in all spectators. However, a few weeks into production, controversy struck the 901. French car manufacturer Peugeot objected to Porsche labeling their new vehicle 901 because they already had a design patent for one of their models which contained a 0 as the middle digit. Peugeot claimed design rights to all 3-digit car model designations, with a 0 as the middle digit. Though other manufacturers had used this model designation, Peugeot took special interest in Porsche, going as far as bringing the German automaker to court. Ultimately, Porsche decided on a simple solution: rename their 901 prototype to 911. At last, the legendary 911 moniker was born. Nonetheless, Porsche had already produced 82 units officially named 901, but they were never sold to the public. These units were used for testing and exhibitions only. Some have ended on private ownership, but no 901 was openly sold to the public. In September 1964, after 6 years of constant redesign, engineering, and development, the 911 finally launched to the public.
At Porsche, we don't let you buy a car unless we've test-driven it first.
The 901, now officially the 911, featured an air-cooled flat-6 naturally aspirated boxer engine with a single overhead cam and 2 valves per cylinder. At the time, it made an impressive 130 horsepower at 62,000 RPM and 119 pound-feet of torque at 4,600 RPM. It was mated to a Type 901 manual transmission featuring either 4 or 5 speed configurations. The fastback design featured a downward sloping roofline. The front end had circular headlights and the interior had a 2+2 seat configuration. Weighing only around 1,080 kilograms, the car was everything Bootsy and Ferry had imagined: fast, agile, comfortable, and stylish. A true successor to the 356. The original 911 was a capable machine, and each iteration brought small but efficient changes to the car. In 1966, the Porsche 911S was introduced, which bumped the horsepower from 130 to 160, and for the first time, Aluminum alloy 5-spoke wheels were offered. This was meant to be the top of the line model. A year later, the 911A received upgrades in the form of dual brake circuits and widened wheels. Additionally, this was the year the iconic Targa top was introduced. As the variations of the 911 grew, Porsche designated alphabet letters to indicate a revision for their production cars, usually on an annual basis. The Porsche Series B, Series C, and Series D didn't make any radical changes to the 911. However, it is noteworthy to mention that Series C finally introduced a semi-automatic option. The 911 E-Series brought a bigger 2.4-liter engine and fuel injection in higher-end models. Due to power and torque increment, the transmission was also updated. The F-Series had minor updates as well, but the following G-Series saw drastic changes in technology. Now, this is where the fun begins. However, before Porsche could enter the G-Series classification, they released a mad machine from hell. The 1973 Porsche 911 Carrera S 2.7. It was this vehicle that reintroduced the now legendary RS nomenclature, which stands for Rennsport in German, translated to race sport. On top of this model reintroduced the Carrera name from the previous 356 Carrera. Porsche wanted everyone to know this car meant business. It was essentially produced to meet motorsport homologation requirements of Group 4 Special GT, and compared to the current top-of-the-line 911S, the Carrera 2.7 RS had a larger engine making 210 horsepower, featured mechanical fuel injection, a stiffer suspension, larger brakes, wider rear wheels and rear fenders, less overall weight, and the all-famous ducktail rear spoiler. This machine was capable of max speeds of around 245 kilometers per hour and did 0 to 60 in 5.8 seconds. The car became an icon worldwide. Many hold this iteration as the most pure 911 ever. Between the standard RS, RS Lightweight, RS Touring, and RS-R variants of the Carrera 2.7 RS, a total of 1,580 cars were built. However, the Carrera RS was not meant to be produced forever. It was a one-time type ordeal, one which not everyone could afford. This left the normal 911 production line needing more excitement. By 1973, the 911 had already been in production for a decade. It was in dire desire of an evolution. Although Porsche had been revising and perfecting the car with each new iteration, it was time for something more advanced, something faster, more agile, more capable. A new iteration that brought excitement once again. And in 1974, Porsche introduced the G-Series. It was the dawn of a new generation. The car saw both performance and body changes to meet legislative requirements around the world for safety and emissions. The base model now featured a 2.7-liter engine with 150 horsepower, and the 911S delivered 175 horsepower. In the body styling department, new impact bumpers were fitted for low-speed protection requirements of US regulations. Lastly, the car finally began to utilize Bosch K-Jetronic fuel injectors in 2 of the 3 models in the 911 lineup. The G-Series only lasted a year. Many people believe that the G-Series lasted from 1973 through 1989, but it's important to note that the G-Series only ran in the model year 1974, with the H-Series being produced in model year 1975, the I-Series in 1976, and the J-Series in 1977, and so on. One of the biggest changes occurred in 1975 when Porsche gave birth to an icon, a machine few could tame, a car that pushed the limits of speed and traction. the Porsche 930 Turbo, also known as the Widowmaker. Turbocharging gave new energy to the Porsche 911. Literally, the turbo not only marked the beginning of the turbocharging era for Porsche, one which is still present to this day, but it marked the beginning of an entirely new internal code name, the Type 930. Now, it's important to clarify that Type 930 refers to the internal code designation of the 911. Porsche assigns new code numerations to cars that are heavily redesigned from the ground up. In this case, Porsche utilized Type 930 to indicate the addition of turbo to the 911. Okay, now back to the history. Well, the original purpose of the 911 Turbo was to gain homologation for the 1976 racing season. It quickly became popular among car enthusiasts. It was a top-of-the-range model in the 911 lineup. Featuring flared rear fenders, it gave the car an extra 12 centimeters in width. With the added power, the car needed a spoiler to maintain better handling at high speeds, and so the 930 Turbo featured a rear spoiler known as the whale tail. The car was fast, blazing fast. With the new turbo setup, Porsche pushed the power output to 260 horsepower at 5,500 RPM and 243 pound-feet of torque at 4,000 RPM. It was the fastest production Porsche ever. In fact, it was the fastest production car available in Germany at the time. Following the ever-evolving protocol for their cars, Porsche pushed the power of the 930 Turbo to 300 horsepower starting in model year 1978. And not only had the power increased,
I need more power.
The car now had bumpers with black elbows, electronically adjustable side mirrors, the whale tail spoiler now changed to a T-tray spoiler, a raised version to make room for the intercooler. The suspension earned new anti-roll bars, firmer shock absorbers, and larger diameter rear torsion bars. Porsche also upgraded the brake to match those used on the 917 race car. The 930 was carrying the championship racing pedigree Porsche had earned in their Le Mans, Rally, GTP, and Can-Am racing series. Although the 930 Turbo saw great demand and success, owners and drivers of this car quickly learned just how demanding it was to drive. With the classic rear engine layout, short wheelbase, and now the addition of turbo lag, the car demanded full attention and concentration when driving it. Due to its wild nature, several crashes, and even some deaths, the car acquired the nickname the Widowmaker. Porsche did not enjoy having the name of their flagship model associated with death, and they began to roll out training courses in which you would first learn how to drive a 911 Turbo before you could take it home. Despite the negative aura around the 930 Turbo, the car was produced well into the 80s. This later 1987 to 89 models were also available in Targa and Cabriolet variants. However, because of emissions regulations changing in Japan and the USA, Porsche had to withdraw the 930 Turbo from those markets in 1980. Instead of complying with the regulations, Porsche made plans to replace the 911 with their new 928 flagship. Porsche envisioned the luxurious 928 to eventually replace the 911 as the top-of-the-range model across all markets. This vision, fueled by CEO Furman and mixed in with new emission compliances, meant the 911 was close to an end. But sales for the 911 were still going strong, and in 1981, with newly appointed CEO Peter W. Schutz, the 911 had the green light to continue production and finance the update of the car's emission systems, rectifying the 930 for sale in all markets. Finally, in 1986, the 930 Turbo once again was available for purchase in the US and Japan.
All of which Professor Porsche considers a good beginning.
The G-Series classification and Turbo era are intertwined together, and during this iteration of the 911, various other notable variants came to life besides the Turbo. From 1978 to 1983, a new version of the 911 was introduced, the 911 SC. borrowing the SC designation for the first time since the 956 SC. With this variant, Porsche introduced a 3.0-liter aluminum engine with fuel injection and a 5-speed Type 915 transmission. The original power output was 180 horsepower and later climbed to 188, finishing off at around 204 horsepower. Another notable entry to the 911 lineup was the introduction of a cabriolet variant. Debuting in 1982 for model year 1983, it was Porsche's first cabriolet since the 356 of the mid-1960s. Fast forward to 1984 and the replacement for the SC series came in the form of a new Carrera, the 911 3.2 Carrera. The higher 3.2-liter displacement engine, which Porsche claimed to be 80% new, achieved 207 horsepower for North American delivered cars and 234 horsepower for other markets. Towards the end of the 1980s, the G series and subsequent series of 911s were officially coming to an end. In fact, 1989 marks the official last iteration of the original 911, with all following series featuring new body styling, brake, electronic, and suspension technologies. The G series injected new life to the 911 lineup, and the inception of turbo implementation revitalized it further. Now, there was a 911 model for all likings. A naturally aspirated, comfort-focused trim or a fast accelerating turbo variant. But despite all the engineering advancements, emission upgrades, and roof variants Porsche made to the 911, various automotive experts were predicting the imminent end of an era. It's the early 90s. The digital age begins to take shape. Newspapers around the world announce the collapse of the Soviet Union.
Mikhail Gorbachev has been removed from power.
West and East Germany become one, giving birth to the modern German state. NASA launches the Hubble telescope.
3, 2, 1, and liftoff of the Space Shuttle Discovery with the Hubble Space Telescope, our window on the universe.
The Gulf War erupts. The World Wide Web and the Internet are born. And at the Porsche headquarters in Stuttgart, Germany, there are plans for a new iteration of the 911. A generational technological leap that would bring 85% new components and virtually none of the predecessor's architecture. And it all began in 1989 with the introduction of a new internal code numeration, the Type 964. Sold under the badge 911 Carrera 2 and 911 Carrera 4, the Type 964 was the technological leap Porsche desired in its 911 lineup. It was a contemporary take on its classic two-door sports car. As per usual, Porsche did not modify the exterior extensively, but it did add integrated polyurethane bumpers and an automatically extending rear spoiler that raised at speeds of above 50 miles per hour and replaced the classic whale tail. The interior, however, did receive major upgrades, featuring dual airbags, a new automatic climate control system, and revised instrumentation, evolving into a cockpit that attempted to blend performance with comfort. Additionally, the car now featured many creature comforts, including Porsche's first use of their Tiptronic automatic transmission, power steering, a dual-mass flywheel, ABS, and twin-spark ignition. At its core, it was still a 911, but the Type 964 had a completely redesigned chassis. The rear suspension saw a change from torsion bar to trailing arms, with Porsche's Weissach rear axle, adding self-steering elements to reduce the chance of oversteer. In an attempt to further reduce the oversteer tendencies of the previous generation, Porsche introduced an all-wheel drive system for the first time ever. It was innovative and effective. Being fully mechanical, the system could sense wheels slipping and automatically transfer power elsewhere, ensuring the driver could maintain a higher degree of control. This all-wheel drive evolutionary step was, well, revolutionary. For the model year 1989, all 911s were all-wheel drive, and in 1990, Porsche introduced rear-wheel drive once again. They differentiated the two models through branding. The 911 Carrera 4 was all-wheel drive, the 911 Carrera 2 was rear-wheel drive. The base model 911 now had a 3.6-liter flat-six naturally aspirated engine, making an impressive 250 horsepower and 228 pound-feet of torque. This engine, codenamed the M64-01, was the foundation of the new Type 964. It featured a lighter crankshaft, plastic intake manifold, increased valve overlapping, higher lift. It was quieter, all new timing chain tensioners, lighter, drilled and sodium-filled intake valves, ceramic exhaust port liners, etc., etc., all which made the M64 a technological evolution of the 911 and pushed the car to top speeds of 260 kilometers per hour and a 0 to 60 time of 5.7 seconds. There was no denying it, the 911 was getting better and faster. And if enthusiasts craved more speed, in 1990, Porsche introduced a Type 964 Turbo. Instead of redesigning the M64 engine for turbo applications, Porsche utilized the previous 3.3-liter engine from the Type 930, with revisions of course. For the year 1992, Porsche made a lightweight version of the Turbo, simply known as the Turbo S Lightweight. The engine received a second oil cooler and higher boost, revised camshafts, injection valves, and a lightweight flywheel hooked up to a 5-speed manual transmission. Production was extremely limited, with only 86 models produced. For model year 1993, the standard 911 Turbo received an upgraded and more powerful 3.6-liter engine, delivering an impressive 355 horsepower. For some Porsche executives, this wasn't enough, and in 1994, Porsche treated some 93 chassis to Porsche exclusive enhancements and created the very special Turbo 3.6S model that made 380 horsepower, almost 400 horsepower from a factory car. This made the Turbo S one of the fastest cars on the road. Porsche seemed to have a penchant for this new iteration. Hence, the Type 964 was the foundation of special edition 911s. In addition to the Turbo S variants, Porsche released the American Roadster in 1992, which was essentially a turbo-bodied cabriolet, the true 964 Speedster, and the 964 Carrera RS. The Carrera RS debuted in 1992 alongside the Turbo S and was based on Porsche's 911 Carrera Cup race car. It was a callback to the earlier 2.7 and 3.0 RS and RSR models of the 70s. This Carrera RS had a revised M64 engine, the 03 version, with the increment empowered to 260 and featured a lightweight flywheel, a track-oriented suspension which lowered the ride height by 40mm, stiffer springs, shocks, and adjustable stabilizer bars without power steering, except for some right-hand drive UK cars which did have power steering. The interior was stripped out. No power windows, no power seats, no rear seats, no air conditioning, cruise control, sound deadening, or stereo system. Topped off with new racing bucket front seats, an aluminum hood, magnesium wheels, and thinner glass, the Carrera RS of this generation was a track-focused machine and weighed approximately 155 kilos less than the standard US Carrera 2 model. Pushing the boundaries even more, Porsche later introduced an ultra-limited version, the Carrera 3.8 RS, which featured the turbo body and 300 horsepower from the bored-out 3.8-liter engine. The message Porsche was sending to the rest of the automotive world was simple. The 911 is evolving. It is getting faster, lighter, and more track-focused. With its innovative all-wheel drive system, redesigned engines, improved turbo lag, and race technology, the Type 964 was, once again, pushing the boundaries of what was possible, breaking through engineering problems and barriers. The machine was slowly transforming into the quintessential sports car, and in 1994, it would appear that Porsche had finally arrived at something truly superb. Considered by a myriad of Porsche enthusiasts as a perfect 911, the next iteration, the glorious Type 993, is a culmination of years of evolution. Debuting in January 1994, the Type 993 featured an all-new front and rear ends. The bodywork was smoother, curvier, more sensual than ever before. The prominent two lines defining the 911 design were the most cohesive they had ever been. Devised by an Englishman, Tony Hatter, under the supervision of design chief Harm Lagay, the streamlined design was slower slung than previous iterations, compact and tight, with almost perfect proportions. The Type 993 has now become one of the most iconic silhouettes in the 911 heritage. The overall car shared less than 20% of the parts from its older brother, the Type 964. These engineering improvements earned the Type 993 a true reputation of being dependable and reliable. Some of these evolutionary improvements were an all-aluminum multi-link rear suspension largely derived from the stillborn Porsche 989 and an all-aluminum subframe. The result was improved ride-and handling, the rectification of the common problems with earlier models to oversteer, and reduced lift-oversteer tendencies inherent of the rear engine layout. The engine capacity remained at 3.6 liters, but Porsche raised the power to 268 in the base trim, courtesy of better engine management and exhaust design. The power later rose to 282, beginning with model year 1996. The Carrera 4S and Carrera 2S both received a more powerful 285 horsepower power plant. All these engines were mated to the standard 6-speed manual transmission, the first 6-speed transmission in Porsche 911 lineup. Enthusiasts from all over were praising the new generation of 911s, and in 1995, Porsche gave them something even greater to admire with the introduction of the Type 993 Turbo. Porsche developed a history of reserving some of its best engineering for the RS or turbo variants of the 911 lineup, and this iteration was no exception. The Type 993 Turbo became the first standard production Porsche with twin turbos, and the first 911 Turbo to be equipped with permanent all-wheel drive. Porsche looked at their flagship supercar, the 959, for inspiration to create the new Type 993 Turbo. As a result, the Type 993 Turbo featured the 3.6-liter twin-turbocharged M64-60 engine, making an extremely impressive 402 horsepower. This launched the car to top speeds of over 322 kilometers per hour and had a 0 to 60 time in 3.7 seconds. Special was an understatement. The rear wheel arches were 6 centimeters wider than the Carrera. The fixed whale tail was bigger to house the intercoolers, and the new 18-inch wheels featured hollow spokes, a first in a production vehicle. As if this jump in performance was not enough, in 1997, Porsche debuted the Turbo S with more power, a larger spoiler, and better cooling. This variant made 450 horsepower. Clearly, power was the name of the game, and Porsche was not holding back in releasing special variants of the Type 993. Once again, the German automaker made a callback to the RS nameplate, and the 911 Carrera RS returned as a light-bodied, limited-run car. Featuring a naturally aspirated 3.8-liter engine, the power output was 296 horsepower. Easily distinguishable from other variants, it was the only 911 in the lineup to feature a large fixed wing. Being a ranch sport, the car received a track treatment, shedding a lot of weight from the removal of the rear seats, special race-tuned suspension, lightweight front seats, minimal soundproofing, headlight washer delete, and an aluminum bonnet and thinner glass as well. The final weight of the car was merely 1,280 kilograms. As if this wasn't enough, an even rarer iteration was produced, the Carrera RS Club Sport or RSR-RSCS. This vehicle was truly track-only, equipped with a welded roll cage, no carpets, no power windows, no air conditioning, and no radio. It also had a bigger rear wing. And just as Porsche was beginning to close its cycle of the Type 993, they finished off with a bang. Somewhere in the Porsche headquarters, in the darkest corner of the factory, a wild specimen was evolving. A berserk, untamed organism with only one goal in mind: racing. And in an unprecedented collision of two worlds, Porsche finally merged its lightweight model of the Carrera RS and lightweight variants with the transcending power of the Turbo series. In 1995, just before the dawn of the new century, Porsche introduced the 911 GT2, a race homologated monster making 424 horsepower and 0 to 60 in less than 4 seconds. The car received much of the same treatment as the RS variants, lightweight construction, no creature comforts, and race spec suspension. Essentially, the GT2 was the racing version of the 993 Turbo, and the racing variant participated in the FIA GT2 class racing series. Later on, for 1997, Porsche updated the GT2 to 430 horsepower and finished off at 450 horsepower for model year 1998. Only 57 road legal variants were built and badged as the 911 GT for this final year of the Type 993 GT2 generation. It was the swan song of the 993 generation, a generation lasting from 1994 to 1998, and which many hail as the best of the 911. It was a significant advance not just from a technical but also a visual perspective, a unique blend of power and simple elegance, an ideal blend of technology and classic 911 air-cooled heritage. Simply the best of the best, an evolutionary culmination of racing and performance, and the end of the air-cooled era. The world was getting faster, emission regulations were getting tighter, performance demands were growing, and in the quest for more, Porsche's iconic air-cooled engines just would not match the horsepower and performance longevity that water-cooled engines could provide. After spending decades perfecting the air-cooled engine, Porsche recognized that this iconic power plant was no longer advantageous to its evolution. Porsche had to do what was needed to keep up with the rest of the world, and in 1998, the company introduced its first water-cooled 911. The Type 996.
If we never release a new Porsche 911, the sun will still shine, life will go on. For the world is quite satisfied with the 911 it has now. Unfortunately, we're not very good at being satisfied. Introducing the new 911. It's everything we know so far, which is a lot.
The Type 996 marks an interesting time in 911 history. It was a new take on the classic sports car. With financial troubles creeping up at the Porsche headquarters and strict emission regulations endangering the life of the 911, the German automaker had to make radical changes to its iconic car. The new design, developed by Pink Lay under Porsche design chief Harm Legay, was a strong deviation from its classic 911 architecture. The body was new, the interior was new, and of course, the engine was water-cooled. Porsche wanted its design team to imagine a 911 for the next millennium. The car got longer by 18.5 centimeters and wider by 4 centimeters. The chassis became 45% stiffer, courtesy of high-strength steel, and despite adding radiators and coolant, the car was lighter by 50 kilograms. At the time, Porsche was launching a new introductory model to its product line, the Porsche Boxster or 986, and thus, development for the Type 996 was closely linked to that of the Boxster. As a result, the 996 shares some commonalities with the new Boxster, most notably the headlights. Porsche had gone away with the iconic round headlights and instead fitted the new Type 996 with some slanted oval-shaped headlights, often called the fried egg lights because of their shape. This did not sit well with enthusiasts. It was too much too fast. The iconic silhouette was still present, but the lines were heavily revised. The switch to water cooling was already met with grumbles and cries of "it's lost its character." Adding on the change of the iconic headlights just made things worse. However, performance did increase, and although the number of cylinders remained the same, the 3.4-liter engine now had a power output increment to 296. It would tap into the 300s for later revised models. But what was most important was how much more environmentally friendly the new power plant was. It had reduced emissions, engine noise, and fuel consumption. As car aficionados, emissions are the last thing we worry about when we talk about sports cars, but these very emissions and requirements are at the forefront of R&D for car automakers. If they cannot meet emissions, their cars cannot be produced. Porsche had achieved this goal of meeting strict emission regulations with its iconic 911, keeping the legacy alive. With this new influx of technology, Porsche began to experiment just how much they could push their 911 in terms of special variants and homologations. And in typical Porsche fashion, a Type 996 Turbo was introduced for the model year 2001. Unlike the naturally aspirated version, the Turbo featured a water-cooled, twin-turbocharged, intercooled 3.6-liter engine, a power plant derived from the 1998 Le Mans winning GT1 Porsche 911. This turbo was fast, very fast, with a power output of 414 horsepower at 6,000 RPM and 415 pound-feet of torque. Adding the X50 package brought the horsepower up to 444 horses, and the search for more culminated with the Turbo S, making 450 horsepower. All turbo models were all-wheel drive only, featured a wider stance than the regular 911 Carrera, and Porsche equipped them with bi-xenon headlamps. Although the lifetime of the Type 996 was only 7 years, from 1998 to 2004, important updates were made for the 2001 to 2004 911s, essentially dividing this generation into two eras: the 996.1, made from 1998 to 2001, and the revised 996.2, produced from 2001 to 2004. With this revised version, Porsche changed the integrated headlights that had been shared between the 911 and the Boxster in years prior, but the shape was still not oval. However, the best upgrade was updating the engine displacement from 3.4 liters to 3.6 liters, bringing the power up to 320 horsepower. Alongside the standard 911 models, Porsche also developed track-focused machines. Having found great success in the GT1 class at Le Mans, Porsche wanted to bring this championship pedigree to its product lineup and did so with the introduction of the GT3. The GT3 was based on the standard 996 Carrera, but it was heavily stripped to reduce the car's overall weight. It was stiffer, offered better handling, and had more stopping power with its upgraded brakes. Porsche manufactured two versions of the GT3. The MK.1 GT3, released in 1999 to all markets except North America, and the MK2 GT3. This time around, it was available in North America. The MK1 GT3 had a naturally aspirated 3.6-liter engine that produced 360 horsepower. It was the same engine used in the Turbo and thus heavily based on the engine used in the 911 GT1 Le Mans car. The MK2 GT3, on the other hand, was based on the second generation of the Porsche 996 and featured updated aerodynamics and a more powerful version of the 3.6-liter engine, producing a remarkable 380 horsepower. As if this wasn't enough, Porsche gave the GT3 the Rennsport treatment, and in 2001, Porsche launched the GT3 RS variant, bringing it back in 2004. You would think Porsche had done enough to satisfy the never-ending needs of the public, but you are wrong, and in 2001, Porsche also debuted the Type 996 GT2. The GT2 was rear-wheel drive just like the GT3. Although Porsche's all-wheel drive was world-class, the GT2 and GT3 class racing rules mandated the use of a rear-wheel drive platform. Thus, the special GT series were rear-wheel drive only, saving a lot of weight in the process. The turbos were larger and the intercoolers as well. Combined with a revised intake and exhaust system and a reprogrammed engine control software, the GT2 made 489 horsepower and 484 pound-feet of torque. It was powerful and the first car in the 911 lineup to come with ceramic brakes as standard equipment. It was clear the GT2 was an extreme race-focused machine. With all these variants, Porsche was letting the world know that they were not afraid to experiment, marking the Type 996 generation as the inception of Porsche pushing the boundaries in their GT cars for years to come. The previous Type 993, an almost perfectly balanced car, was a hard act to follow for the Type 996. Nonetheless, in many ways, the 996 generation was the right step forward for the 911. Porsche made a successful change to water-cooled engines, allowing the car to be more emission-friendly and more powerful. They revised suspension, brakes, and chassis to allow for better handling. The turbo lag was diminishing, and the overall performance was going in the positive direction. Regardless, many purists did not like this evolution and argued that the 911 had lost part of its soul. The unflattering title of the fried egg 911, courtesy of the new headlight design, and the overall front end lines resembling the entry model Boxster raised concern among 911 enthusiasts about where the iconic silhouette was headed. It did not help that the interior wasn't any better, with a big majority of it utilizing hard plastic. Adding up the prone IMS failure, which could render the engine inoperable, needing rebuild or replacement, ultimately led the Type 996 to be the most undesirable 911, despite the special variants that it brought, like the GT3, GT2, and GT3 RS. Still, Porsche persevered and continued to evolve its 911 into the quintessential sports car it is today, leading us to the present day, the avant-garde. This era represents the successful merger of the search for high performance with the iconic styling the 911 was known for, the melting pot of years of stylistic and engineering refinement, an evolutionary leap that would cement Porsche as an icon in the automotive world. And it begins with the Porsche 911 Type 997. The oval headlights are back. I repeat, the oval headlights are back. For the model year 2005 to 2012, Porsche unveiled the Type 997, and yes, the bug eyes were indeed back. In fact, much of the design featured the same classic silhouette as all earlier 911s. The car had larger 18-inch wheels standard, a refined race-inspired appearance, it was wider than its predecessor by 88mm, and the interior had new controls reminiscent of classic 911 interiors. It was an evolution, not a revolution, with Porsche changing just enough to bring the classic silhouette back. Once again, the Type 997 was divided into two series. The first phase, Type 997.1, ran from model year 2005 to 2008. This iteration had a slick shape and a myriad of modern tech inside and outside. For the first time since 1977, Porsche offered two engine displacements. The base Carrera had a 3.6-liter Boxer engine making 321 horsepower, while the more powerful Carrera S had a larger 3.8-liter engine, good for 350 horsepower. Additionally, the continuation of the X kit with the newly added X51 raised the power even further in the S, 4S, and Targa models. The Type 997 is widely hailed as a true high-performance car. With its updated powertrain, all 911 models were reaching 0 to 60 in less than 5 seconds, and the turbo variants getting into the mid 3.5 seconds. They had bigger brakes, lowered suspension, Porsche's new stability control systems, sports exhaust, etc. The 997 didn't just perform, but now it had the classic 911 details which the Type 996 was missing. During this initial run, the Type 997.1 debuted the turbo variant in February 2006, featuring a new front bumper with LED turn signal strips integrated in the air intakes, fog lamps moved to the corners of the bumpers, larger air vents, a wide body shell, and a retractable wing. A notable improvement was the reduction of 41 kilograms due to the extensive use of aluminum in key elements of the car. The machine now made 473 horsepower and 457 pound-feet of torque and featured variable turbine geometry. It was a straight-line beast, reaching 0 to 60 in 3.9 seconds with a manual and 3.7 seconds with a 5-speed Tiptronic S transmission. Ceramic brakes were available as an option if you were serious about tracking your new 911. However, if you were really serious about hitting the track, perhaps you could do it in the new 997 GT2. At the time of its release, the new 997 GT2 was the most powerful and fastest road-going 911 to have ever been sold to the public. It was a berserk specimen with no regard for anything other than speed. It had a revised full titanium exhaust and was rear-wheel drive, utilizing the existing 3.6-liter engine but equipped with twin variable geometry turbochargers. The GT2 made an astonishing 523 horsepower and 502 pound-feet of torque, delivered through a 6-speed manual transmission. Such power meant the new GT2 was the first Porsche equipped with launch control. This was new, uncharted territory for the 911 lineup. On the naturally aspirated side, Porsche also introduced a new GT3. This new iteration featured race-inspired aerodynamics, The special front bumper increased cooling for the front-mounted radiators. The suspension was lowered, and the car only weighed 1,395 kilograms. The naturally aspirated engine made 409 horsepower and 299 pound-feet of torque with a glorious 8,400 RPM redline. An even more aggressive variant was launched with the GT3 RS, stripping away almost all creature comforts, adding extensive use of carbon fiber for weight reduction and full roll cage options. Revisions followed, and in 2008, Porsche introduced an updated 997, the 997.2. This midlife revision brought slight modifications, among which were direct fuel injection for all engines, revised suspension systems, a revised front bumper with larger air intakes, headlamps with LED daytime running lights, and newly optional dual HID projectors. The rear bumper had a new LED taillight design. The mirrors were enlarged. It had a redesigned PCM system with touchscreen with an optional hard drive, navigation, and Bluetooth, and among one of the finest changes was the introduction of Porsche's Doppelkupplgetriebe, or PDK transmission, which replaced the optional Tiptronic S. The base Carrera model made 340 horsepower, climbing up to 523 horsepower for the Turbo S. The new turbo was unveiled at the 2009 Frankfurt Motor Show, and the 523 horsepower was derived from a completely new 3.8-liter 6-cylinder engine. The overall weight of the engine decreased by 10 kilograms and had a decrease in turbo boost to 11.6 psi. Alongside the engine, the suspension system was revised as well and featured new software enhanced handling. Paired up with a 6-speed manual or a 7-speed dual-clutch PDK gearbox, launch control, and an overboost function meant the new turbo could accelerate from 0 to 60 in a blazing 3.4 seconds and attain a top speed of 312 kilometers per hour. The Turbo S, on the other hand, the top-of-the-line turbo model, debuted in 2010 at the Geneva Motor Show and boasted 523 horsepower and 516 pound-feet of torque. This almighty Turbo S had a carbon fiber airbox, carbon ceramic brakes, and the Sport Chrono package as standard features. All of these improvements made the Turbo S the fastest production car to date alongside the race-ready GT2 RS. Fast forward to the new decade, Porsche began to push the envelope with the GT and special edition variants of the new Type 997.2. The updated Porsche 911 GT3 was introduced at the 2009 Geneva Motor Show. Staying true to the GT3 heritage, the new version was naturally aspirated, but featured a 3.8-liter flat-six engine, good for 429 horsepower and 317 pound-feet of torque, and a redline of 8,500 RPM. This variant featured vents between the taillights, a larger rear wing with 3.8 lettering on either side of the wing, forged pistons, lightweight valves, and hollow camshafts in order to make the engine lightweight. Total downforce was doubled. In typical Porsche character, this was not enough, and released a GT3 RS, a machine with higher engine power output, 444 horsepower, lower weight, and shorter transmission ratios, paired up with upgraded body and suspension components. The GT3 RS was a specimen on the track. This was even more true for the final evolution of the 997 GT3, the 911 GT3 RS 4.0. As the name suggests, this GT3 had a displacement increment to 4.0 liters, increasing the power to 496 and 339 pound-feet of torque. However, all of these variants were eclipsed by the one variant to rule them all, the 2010 Porsche 911 GT2 RS. This car was the absolute climax of engineering for the 911. It was the fastest and most powerful road-going sports car ever built in the history of Porsche. Being a Rennes Sport, it was stripped to bare minimum necessities, reducing the weight down by 70 kilograms compared to the already light GT2, and with an increment of 90 base horsepower, the car now had a mind-bending 620 horsepower. The new GT2 RS had a power-to-weight ratio of 2.1 kilos per horsepower, an astonishing feat, putting this vehicle as the best in its class for power-to-weight ratio. Setting a 7-minute 18-second lap at the Nürburgring, the car was the fastest and most powerful 911 ever. This generation further included other special variants such as the GT3 Cup, a Carrera Cup race car based on the 911 GT3 RS, the return of the Speedster for the year 2011, limited to only 365 units, and a special 911 Sport Classic, a version of the 911 Carrera S Coupe inspired by the iconic 1973 Carrera RS 2.7. This Sport Classic was limited to only 250 units worldwide and featured a fixed ducktail rear wing, similar to the one found on the original Carrera RS 2.7. Without a doubt, the Type 997 fixed many of the questionable stylistic choices made in the previous generation. Porsche sharpened the 911 character and gave it an even more dynamic and powerful appearance. The resemblance to older 911 generations, such as the iconic 993 and 964, combined with emerging new technology like PDK, better turbo management, and improved engine management, meant the 911 was headed in the right direction. With over 24 models available in every performance, body style, and combinations imaginable, the 997 marked the biggest growth in options and sale volumes. In fact, it became the best-selling generation of the 911 to date. This success would carry over to the next generation of 911s, and in typical Darwinian fashion, in 2011, Porsche debuted lucky number 7, the Type 991.
Alles, was wir je gedacht haben. Alles, wofür wir kämpfen. Alles, wovon wir träumen. Alles, was wir sind. Der neue 911. Porsche Identität.
Coined the prettiest 911 in decades, the new 7th generation Type 991 was an entirely new platform, only the third since the original 911 launched. This new iteration was longer, sleeker, lighter, more sensual, more powerful. The iconic arching roofline was redesigned to taper more gradually to the rear of the car. The front wings were placed higher than the lid. The interior technology was upgraded and the components utilized were more luxurious. Porsche developed a new transaxle, pushing the rear wheels 76mm backward in relation to the position of the engine, resulting in a dramatically improved weight distribution and cornering performance. Now, it was common for Porsche to update their cars mid-series cycle, and the Type 991 was no exception. The 911 Type 991.1 was produced from 2011 to 2015. With a slight line redesign, Porsche made the Type 991 even sleeker but still maintained the iconic 911 silhouette. Despite being bigger and more tech-focused, the new 991.1 was lighter than its predecessor by approximately 55 kilograms, and although it was more powerful, the car was equipped with a 3.4-liter engine as opposed to the previous 3.6-liter. In spite of this downsize in displacement, the base Carrera still made 345 horsepower and 288 pound-feet of torque. The Carrera S maintained the 3.8-liter engine and made 395 horsepower and 325 pound-feet of torque. The Carrera 4 and Carrera 4S were the all-wheel drive versions of the Carrera series. More models were coming, and in 2014, Porsche added the 911 Carrera GTS, a car sitting between the Carrera S and GT3, featuring increased horsepower to 424, sport chrono package, sport exhaust, dynamic engine mounts, etc. etc. It was essentially a more track-focused 911 without losing creature comforts that the GT series dropped. On the forced induction side, the 991.1 Turbo now made 513 horsepower from a 3.8-liter twin-turbocharged engine. The S version had a power increment to 552 horsepower and 516 pound-feet of torque. Of course, both were all-wheel drive only and available exclusively with a 7-speed PDK. This new turbo was fast, extremely fast, reaching 0 to 60 in just 2.9 seconds, and as slow as 2.6 seconds in some third-party tests. The 911 was becoming faster and faster with each passing generation, and Porsche made sure to continue producing its race-spec 911s as well. In 2013, the 911 Type 991.1 received the GT treatment with the introduction of the GT3. It received a 3.8-liter direct fuel injection engine, making 475 horsepower, and for the first time being mated to a PDK dual-clutch transmission only. No manual option was offered. Despite 2 incidents of the new GT3 catching fire, pushing Porsche to recall all 785 units and replace the engine, the car sold extremely well. This naturally aspirated machine was climbing into the low 3 seconds for a 0 to 60 time, going from standstill to 60 in just 3.1 seconds. Not being satisfied, Porsche released the Type 991.1 GT3 RS in 2015. The GT3 RS had front fenders equipped with louvers above the wheels, and the rear fenders included intakes from the 911 Turbo to allow for better airflow. The roof was made from magnesium, and the interior had full bucket seats, carbon fiber inserts, lightweight door handles. Really, they were just straps. The club sport package was standard, adding a bolted-on roll cage, preparation for a battery master switch, 6-point safety harness for the driver's seat, and a fire extinguisher. The engine was updated to a 4.0-liter displacement, which pushed the car to 493 horsepower and 339 pound-feet of torque. The GT3 RS was meant to be a track-focused machine without losing the spirited and direct driving offered by naturally aspirated engines. It was not the fastest 911 in the lineup, despite being a GT car, but it was extremely well balanced and crafted. Right before its expected midlife update, Porsche finished off the 991.1 series by building what would perhaps be the greatest and purest 911 ever, the 911R. It was everything Porsche and car enthusiasts alike enjoy from a car. Manual transmission, naturally aspirated engine, high displacement of 4.0 liters, a high redline of 8,500 RPM, exotic lightweight materials, 500 horsepower. A combination of old school soul with new age technology. Only 911 examples were built, and with this, Porsche ended the production of the Type 991.1 and introduced a revised 991.2. The midlife updates were not complete redesigns by any means. They were meant to be refinements. Thus, the updated Porsche 991.2 introduced new styling in the form of an updated front and rear bumper, new dual exhaust pipes, as well as new head and tail light options. Nonetheless, Porsche did make an important change in this midlife renovation. The German automaker did away with naturally aspirated engines and gave their previous NA models, the Carrera and Carrera S, a flat 6 turbo. This did not sit too well with enthusiasts. Purists were upset. In this very generation, Porsche had already made the switch from mechanical to electric steering, and just as the dust was settling from that initial backlash, the switch to turbo-only engines in the Carrera models reawakened the animosity of Porsche aficionados. They feared the classic heritage of the 911 was being lost with the ever-growing technology available. Despite this backlash, people admitted the new power plant was great. The new 3.0-liter twin-turbocharged 6-cylinder flat engine made 370 horsepower in the base Carrera model and 420 horsepower in the Carrera S. Moreover, the torque increment was the most welcome advantage. It transformed the car from a rev to the sky to get performance to a just put your foot down in any gear and take off machine. Perhaps depending on your driving style, you can decide which power delivery method you enjoy the most. Nonetheless, from a technological perspective, the move to turbocharging in the Carrera models was yet another evolutionary step in the right direction. In 2017 came another special edition 911 with the Carrera T or Touring, a car meant for the dedicated enthusiast, featuring the same 370 horsepower engine as the base 911, but made it to a 7-speed manual transmission. Paired up with shorter gearing, lightweight components reducing the overall weight of the car by 20 kilograms, and a limited slip differential, the 911T was a driver's car. Now, the The revised 911 Turbo received the same visual upgrades as the other 991.2s, but obviously saw an increment in power to 533, while the mighty Turbo S variant climbed all the way to 580 horsepower. Additionally, for the year 2017, Porsche unveiled the GT3. For this iteration, the manual transmission option was back, albeit only a 6-speed was offered. Perhaps all the backlash from going turbo in their Carrera series is what pushed Porsche to bring back the manual for the GT3. Whatever the reason, enthusiasts loved this. The car featured a 500 horsepower engine, lighter construction, and rear axle steering. The aesthetics changed a little as well. It had a new front fascia and front spoiler, a fixed rear wing, rear diffuser, and new exhaust openings. The GT3 Touring spec could only be ordered with a manual transmission and came with a retractable rear wing. Furthermore, the GT3 Ren Sport went above and beyond with a track focus schematic. It had a carbon fiber front hood with NACA ducts, just like the 2018 911 GT2 RS. The front spoiler lip was larger and the side skirts enlarged. The rear wing was massive and worked congruently with the underbody diffuser, resulting in 2 times more downforce than the standard GT3. Being a Ren Sport, it had full bucket seats with carbon fiber reinforced backrests, lighter door panels, loops instead of door handles, Alcantara steering wheel, no rear seats, and a bolt-on cage. If a driver opted to add the YSAC package, the car shed even more weight, courtesy of forged magnesium wheels and extra carbon fiber utilization. The engine was revised to make 520 horsepower and 346 pound-feet of torque, launching the car from 0 to 60 in 3 seconds flat, a whole 0.2 seconds faster than the GT3 with a PDK. Topping out at 193 miles per hour, the car is not just fast in straightaways but around corners as well. The GT cars were the cherry on top for the Porsche 911 lineup, and the people expected greatness from them. However, no one could have prepared the public for what was coming. The date, June 30th, 2017. The occasion, Goodwood Festival of Speed. The powertrain, 3.8-liter twin-turbo flat-six engine. The power, 691 prancing horses. The car, Porsche 911 GT2 RS. This release marked the inception of the fastest and most powerful street-legal 911 ever in the history of Dr. Inc. HCF Porsche AG. It was completely mental. The car was fitted with a 7-speed double-clutch PDK for blazing fast shifts, helping it reach 0 to 60 in just 2.7 seconds, and a top speed of 340 kilometers per hour. It came standard with Porsche ceramic composite brakes, full carbon fiber bucket seats, no back seats, and a titanium race cage. The roof was made of magnesium, the front lid, front and rear wings, and boot lid were all carbon fiber, and the exhaust system was full titanium. All these lightweight components meant the car had a wet weight of only 1,470 kilograms. Need more? Add the YSAC package and the weight drops further by 30 kilograms, courtesy of even more carbon fiber and titanium parts. The car went on to set a lap record at the Nürburgring of 6 minutes 47.3 seconds, making it the fastest production car lap time recorded on the track at the time. It even broke records in North American circuits, setting lap records at Road Atlanta, Road America, and Canadian Tire Motorsport Park. Coming in at a staggering starting price of $293,200, it was the most expensive, most extreme, most ludicrous 911 ever. And just as the 991.2 series lifespan was coming to an end, Porsche released yet another special 911, the Speedster. Porsche had already released Speedsters before, but this one utilized the chassis of the GT3 and featured a front and rear bonnet made from carbon fiber composite. Paired up to the chassis was the body shell of the Carrera 4 Cabriolet, and finishing with a powertrain, it had a GT3's 4.0-liter naturally aspirated flat-six engine making 493 horsepower, redlining at a glorious 9,000 RPM and made it to a 6-speed manual transmission, proper. With this, Porsche finished in number 7 generation. A generation that without a doubt was one of the greatest, delivering unique special variants like the Speedster and the 911R to insane specimens like the GT2 RS. The millionth 911 was born, and the dawn of the turbocharging era was among us. It was the last generation to have naturally aspirated Carreras and served as the introduction of electronic steering. Changes that enthusiasts didn't tend well to, but made peace with once they drove the cars and saw how improved and responsive they still were. Being an entirely new platform denoted by the switch to internal code 991, the car was nearly 90% new. It was an evolutionary step forward. Somehow, some way, the 911 just kept getting better and better. Iconic, streamlined design was being successfully merged with advanced technology and exotic materials. The German automaker was evolving the 911 into what is termed the quintessential sports car. At long last, after 6 decades of evolution, after 60 years of continuous development, after a million 911s, after a myriad of special editions, technological changes, championships, lap records, and success, we arrive at the current 8th generation of the 911 with the Type 992. We are now 5 years into production of the new Type 992, and Porsche made just enough changes, the right changes, to this new iteration. Making a callback to the iconic 993, the curvy shape of the fenders, especially at the back, is closer to the 993 than ever before. The front lid has a groove in the middle, and the lid's front edge is straight, not curvy. Of course, the overall stance and design is closer to the 991, a beautiful design as well. But Porsche clearly is merging all the aspects from all generations that makes the 911 such an iconic design. Porsche continues the use of twin turbocharging in the Carrera series, but the power output has increased to 380 horsepower in the base model and 444 horsepower in the Carrera S and 4S models. At launch, the only transmission available was an 8-speed PDK nicknamed PDK2, although now Porsche offers a 7-speed and 6-speed manual in certain models. Compared to the previous 991, the car got wider yet again by 45 millimeters. It comes with a new rear bumper, larger exhaust tips, electrical pop-out door handles, and LED headlights. Perhaps one of the most striking, differentiating aspects of the design is the full-length rear light bar for all models. Technologically, a new heap of advanced systems are also equipped in the new Type 992, including wet mode, night vision assist, and a heavily digitalized interior with big, customizable LCD screens. The top-of-the-line Turbo and Turbo S remain available with the PDK and all-wheel drive only, but of course, they too enjoy a power boost, with the Turbo now making 573 horsepower and the Turbo S making an astonishing 641 horsepower. I'll save you more technical details. Just know that the Turbo and Turbo S are ridiculously fast machines. Fast forward to 2021, and Porsche unveiled its awaited GT cars with the GT3 and GT3 Touring, both which still keep the naturally aspirated heritage alive, producing 502 horsepower, and you can get yours with either a 7-speed PDK or 6-speed manual. A year later in 2022, Porsche launched a special edition 911, the Sport Classic. This spec was essentially a 911 turbo, but with rear-wheel drive and manual transmission only. This iconic combination was first found in the original Porsche 930 Turbo of the 70s. Limited to only 1,250 units worldwide, it deserves a special place in the 911 lineup, being the most powerful Type 992 with manual transmission. As if ruling the concrete roads wasn't enough, Porsche introduced the 911 Dakar in November 2022, a car offering off-road capabilities with 911 performance. It has a raised ride height, 473 horsepower, and 420 pound-feet of torque, all-wheel drive, fender flares, all-terrain tires, and even an optional roof basket. all meant to conquer the rally stage and paying homage to the 1984 Dakar rally winner, the Porsche 911 SC-RS. But perhaps the most ludicrous 911 to emerge from 2022 was a new Type 992 GT3 RS. It featured a dramatically improved aerodynamic profile, courtesy of a kit unlike any other road-going 911. It has vents and fins all over to improve downforce. It's fitted with the first of its class drag reduction system, or DRS, that uses hydraulic ramps to open and close the wing flap to boost top speed and increase downforce, a system previously only utilized in F1 cars. You'd think this specimen came from the faraway future with its extremely aggressive body styling, ridiculous performance, and a wing that could be used in earlier model planes to take flight. With this new iteration of the GT3 RS, Porsche engineers continue to blur the boundary between race-only and road-only technology. We expect to see other variants of the 911 to emerge from the German automaker, including some wild renditions like a Type 992 GT2 and GT2 RS, and whatever else crazy creation Porsche conceives in its Zuffenhausen factory. Whatever it is, rest assured, it will be nothing short of brilliant. In an age where people get bored easily and are constantly seeking the next exciting thing, redesigns appear to be the motto in the automotive world. Every year, we are bombarded with upgrades, new curves, and new bodies. Reinvent and recreate is the norm among car manufacturers. Sometimes it works, most of the time it does not. Darwin taught us that evolution is good, change is good, and Porsche understands this better than anyone. The key is to change what is necessary for survival and keep the traits that are aiding in the success of proliferation. From the original 911, Porsche Automotive recognized the need for a sports car that pushed the boundary of what was possible. The humble beginnings of the 911 might often be eclipsed by the machines being produced at Porsche today, but the Type 901 laid the foundation for all that was to come. Improve and refine is the motto, and though at times Porsche makes bold and often unpopular changes to the 911, in retrospect, that is precisely what keeps them at the forefront of the automotive world and drives the entire industry forward. The early years outlined the recipe for success: fastback design, lightweight, responsive, rear engine, and the never-ending quest for more power. The G-Series brought extensive stylistic revisions to make the car safer and sleeker, suspension and chassis revisions to make the car more responsive and planted. Moreover, the defining change was the inception of a turbo variant. Incorporating forced induction in the 911 lineup set Porsche on a path to push the limits of speed, power, and performance. With the passage of time, enthusiasts demanded more, and Porsche delivered with the Type 964, a car with a completely redesigned chassis, upgraded suspension, power plant, and the introduction of an all-wheel drive system, a revolutionary system for its time. Porsche went on to refine and perfect their 911, resulting in what many call the ultimate 911, the glorious Type 993. In many ways, the Type 993 was a perfect 911, with a blend of power and simple elegance, with great driver engagement and modern performance and technology, all wrapped up in the iconic 911 silhouette. This generation also marked the end of the air-cooled era, as Porsche would switch to water cooling for the following generations. The Type 996 was the beginning of the water cooling formulation and the immense critiques that followed. Enthusiasts felt as though the 911 was losing a part of its soul and character. Combined with the heavy redesign the car went through, the Type 996 marks a period of uncertainty among 911 enthusiasts and the direction the 911 was headed. In reality, Porsche knew that if they were to keep the 911 alive, the change to water cooling was inevitable, as not only greater performance was possible, but better emissions as well. It certainly marked the end of an era, but also gave rise to a new one, the avant-garde. Beginning in 2004 with the Type 997, Porsche was now combining the iconic styling of the 911 with the greatly improved technology available. As Darwin had postulated a whole century and a half earlier, Species evolve over time, advantageous traits are passed, and the best equipped to survive do so. The 911 was reaching an evolutionary pinnacle where only the best traits were present. Twin turbocharging, finely tuned suspension for road or track, advanced systems like wet mode, night vision, axle steering, exotic lightweight materials, PDK, and the list goes on. The modern 911 and its variants is a culmination of decades of constant evolution, one that pushes the boundaries of what is possible. From the most advanced, aggressive, race-inspired variants to the most tamed road-going versions, the two lines remain the same throughout, an iconic silhouette that protrudes history and heritage. Perhaps unknowingly, Booty had created a timeless design that has been perfected through its lifetime. A car with a level of commitment that borders obsession. A machine that evolves and conquers. The 911, on the road, on the gravel, and especially on the track, there is no substitute.